The 9 Silent Chronometers. Stanley Hopkins laid his hat on our table with the air of a man putting down a winning hand. "I shall not keep you above 20 minutes, Mr. Holmes," he said. "I have brought you a complete one." A complete one? Holmes did not look up from the acid-stained corner of the deal table where he was coaxing something colorless into something blue. That is a phrase I have learned to distrust in the mouths of young men. Then distrust it. I shall enjoy that, too. Hopkins sat down and stretched his boots to the fire, and I saw the mud on them, grey and gritty, not the ordinary black of a London street. "The truth is, sir, I did not come for help. I came to be admired. It is not often a man of my rank gets to lay a finished piece of work in front of you and watch you fail to pull it apart." Holmes set down his pipette. For the first time in 9 days, I saw something move behind his face. It had been a wretched fortnight in Baker Street. The fog had come down on the 1st of November, and had not lifted since, and Holmes had spent it in a chair with the newspapers on his knees, reading out the agony columns in a voice of flat contempt, and finding nothing in them worth crossing the room for. "Sit there," he said, "and be as insufferable as you please. Watson, the fire wants coal. Now, Hopkins, a name, a place, an hour. Threadgold and Winch, chronometer makers, of St. John's Square, Clerkenwell. Chronometer makers to the Admiralty, it says over the door, and it is no boast. The senior partner is Mr. Hubert Threadgold, aged 58, was, I should say. He was found on the floor of the second-floor rating room at 20 minutes to 7 last Friday morning by the caretaker. The back of his head had been broken in with something heavy. He had been dead a good many hours. Found how? Lying on his face between the racks, sir, with his arms under him. Dr. Amery, our divisional surgeon, says a single blow from behind, downward, delivered by a right-handed man of no great height. There was no struggle worth the name. His collar was not disarranged. The building? 4 floors and a yard. Machine shop and packing room on the ground, finishing shop on the first, rating room and the partners' offices on the second, stores above. A street door on St. John's Square, and a gate into the yard from the passage at the back. On Friday morning, the street door was locked, and every window in the front was fast. But the yard gate stood unbolted, and the scullery window at the back of the ground floor had been forced with a chisel. "Ah," said Holmes, "that is the burglary, and it is a small one. Mr. Threadgold's pocketbook was picked up in the yard by the coal heaver at 7. It was empty of notes. There had been about £20 in it, we think, by his cash book." "And the finished work?" Hopkins nodded, pleased. "You see it at once, sir. That is what puzzled me for a day. There were 9 gold-cased watches in the first-floor cupboard, worth £300 if they were worth a penny, and the cupboard has a lock a child could open with a bootlace. Not one was touched. £20 in notes taken, £300 in gold left behind." "You have an explanation for that?" "I have. He was disturbed, or he was frightened by what he had done, and he ran. Which brings me to the man." Holmes filled his pipe. "Go on." "Adam Larkin, 24 years old, journeyman finisher, 4 years with the firm. 2 days before the death, on the Tuesday, he and Mr. Threadgold had a quarrel in the finishing shop in front of 11 men. Threadgold told him in those words, "You are robbing me, and I have known it these 3 weeks, and I shall know the whole of it before I am done with you." Larkin said nothing. He went white and went back to his bench. 11 men will swear to it, and 2 of them are old enough to be his father and don't want to. Where was he on the Thursday night? That, said Hopkins, is the whole of my case. He will not say. The fire settled. Holmes had gone very still, in the way he has when a thing catches him properly, without the little theatrical flourish he keeps for clients. He denies nothing. He denies nothing and admits nothing. He was seen at 11:15 at the corner of Seckford Street, which is 200 yards from the works, by a constable who knew him by sight. He was not at his lodging in Rosamond Street that night. His landlady sat up till 1, and his bed was not slept in. He came in at 2:30 in the morning, and she heard him on the stair. In the morning he went to work as usual, and when the news went round the shop, he was sick in the yard. When I took him on the Saturday, and asked him where he had been between 11 and 2:30, he said, "I cannot tell you that." He has said it 11 times since. His solicitor has told him what it will cost him, and he says it again. His boots match a print in the yard. So do 40 other pairs in Clerkenwell. Anything of his in the building? His candle end on the bench in the machine shop, ground floor, and the big lathe there had been run and left warm greased, which no man does at 7 o'clock when he is going home, and the yard gate unbolted, and Larkin is one of 4 men who could have the use of the gate key if he chose. Motive? Hopkins spread his hands. Threadgold had found him out in something. Threadgold said so in front of 11 witnesses. Threadgold was to go through the whole of the last 3 years with him. Larkin is silent because the moment he speaks, he must say what the old man had found. That is the motive, Mr. Holmes, and it is Larkin's own mouth that gives it to me, or rather the shutting of it. And the burglar? Your chisel at the scullery window? Larkin again, sir, covering his tracks. He forced the window from the outside after the fact, and threw the pocket-book into the yard, and left the gold alone, because he had not the nerve to carry it. There was a silence. Hopkins watched Holmes with the frank, hungry look of a young man waiting for a verdict from the only quarter he cared about. "He goes before the magistrate on Tuesday week," he said. "The Treasury will take it. I do not say it is beautiful. I say it holds." Holmes reached up without looking and knocked his pipe out against the bars. "How many candles?" Hopkins blinked. "Sir? How many lights were in that building on Thursday night? You have given me a tallow candle burned down on a bench in the machine shop. Was there anything else?" There was a smear of tallow on the second-floor landing by the head of the stair, and a scrape on the wall. From a dark lantern, I should say, set down and taken up again. So. Holmes rose and went to the window and stood looking down into the yellow murk of Baker Street with his hands behind him. "Your man brings a candle, sets it on a bench on the ground floor, and works at a lathe by its light for some hours. Then he goes upstairs to commit a murder, and for that he takes not his candle, but a dark lantern, which he has also brought, and which he sets down on the landing. Then he goes out of doors, and comes back in through a window he has broken open from the outside, in order to persuade you that a stranger came in, and he leaves £300 behind him to make the picture convincing. Men do stupid things at 2 in the morning. They do. They very rarely do 6 of them in a row, each one requiring a change of mind. He turned round. "You have brought me something better than you know, Hopkins. Have you a copy of the plan of the premises?" "I have it here." "Then leave it. Watson, what have we in the way of trains to Clerkenwell?" "None whatever," I said. "It is 1.5 miles." "Then we shall walk, and you shall tell me on the way why a young man who has been arrested for murder would rather hang than answer a simple question. It is the most interesting fact in the case, and Hopkins has put it last." Clerkenwell in that fog was a place of muffled noises. It is a district of small upper rooms where men make things very small and very exact. And even at 11 in the morning you could hear, through the closed windows of St. John's Square, the thin insect whir of 100 lathes. The works of Threadgold and Winch took up one side of a court off the square, a flat brick front, 4 stories, sash windows with the panes painted white to the height of a man, so that no one could look in or out, and over the door a board in gilt letters gone brown at the edges. Hopkins let us in himself. There was crape on the door-knocker. The ground floor smelled of oil and hot metal. 6 men were at the benches working, because work does not stop for a dead partner, and every one of them looked up as we came through, and then looked down again, with the particular deafness of men who have been questioned already. "The lathe," said Holmes. It stood at the far end, a heavy old thing with a treadle and a countershaft. Holmes went over it as a farrier goes over a horse, and then knelt on the boards under it with his lens. "You have swept here?" "Not I," said Hopkins. "The men were let in on Saturday. They swept." "A pity." He was picking at something in the crack of a board with his penknife. He came up with a few bright curls of metal on his palm, no bigger than eyelashes, and turned his hand to the window. "What does the firm work in, besides brass and steel?" "Nothing," said a voice from the door. He was a squat man of about 50 in a green baize apron, with grey hair cropped close to a square head, and forearms like a cooper's. He had a pair of spectacles pushed up on his forehead, and he did not take them down. "Mr. Culpin," said Hopkins, "the foreman, Mr. Sherlock Holmes." "I know the name." Culpin came forward and looked at the curls on Holmes's palm without touching them. "That's not our metal. That's a white alloy of some sort, and we don't buy it, and we don't cut it. Where was it?" "Under the lathe." "Then somebody's been at my lathe with somebody else's metal, and I'd like to know who, and I'd like to know when." He said it flatly, as a statement of grievance about tools, and I understood at once that he was a man whose feeling ran chiefly to the condition of his shop. "You are the foreman here. How long?" 19 years, 12 as foreman. "Then you will tell me things Inspector Hopkins cannot. First, who locks this building at night?" "I do. 7 o'clock, or 1/2 if there's a job on. I put the gas off at the main in the passage, and I lock the street door and take the key home with me. Old Gillum has the yard." "Gillum?" "Caretaker. He's 70, and he lives in the 2 rooms over the packing shed. He's meant to walk round at 10 and at 12. Culpin's mouth moved. "He's meant to. And on Thursday?" "Thursday I locked up at 7:05 and went home to Islington. Mr. Threadgold was upstairs in the rating room, which was where he was every night of his life. He had his own key to the street door, and he let himself out when he was done. That was the arrangement these 9 years. He worked late by habit. He wound by habit. Culpin said it with a kind of grim respect. 9:30, winter and summer, every night including Christmas night, and he'd let no other man in the trade touch them. He was upstairs with his 40 clocks, and he was happy, which is more than he was anywhere else. I should like to see the rating room. I have been in a good many strange rooms in Holmes's company, and few have stayed with me like that one. It ran the whole depth of the second floor, and it had no fireplace and no window that opened, and the walls were double-boarded with sawdust between, so that the noise of Clerkenwell should not reach it. It was cold as a cellar, and dead quiet in the way that a church is not quiet, because a church has air moving in it. Round 3 walls ran wooden racks in tiers, and in the racks, each in its own brass-bound box with the lid up, sat the chronometers. There were 40 of them. Each one had a card beneath it, with a number in copperplate and a column of figures. They were all going. 40 escapements at once make a sound you feel in the teeth rather than hear, a dry pattering like rain on a taut cloth, and under it, quite distinctly, the slow tick of a regulator clock in a mahogany case against the far wall. Between the racks the boards were scrubbed pale, and 8 feet from the door there was a stain that the scrubbing had not taken out. "He lay with his head there," said Hopkins. Holmes stood in the doorway for a full minute without moving. Then he went round the walls, and he did not look at the stain at all. He looked at the racks. "The trial was broken," he said. "Culpin had come up behind us. It was. 14 days' rating gone for nothing. 9 of them stopped, and the trial's void for the lot, because you can't have a set half run. They're all begun again from Monday. 9 stopped. 9. 12 to 20 on the 3rd tier. Culpin's voice took on the flat grievance again. "A fortnight's work in the fire." "Is that written anywhere?" "It's in the rate book. Everything's in the rate book. Mr. Threadgold would have written down the weather in hell if he'd been sent there." "Where is the rate book?" "In the office through that door, where the police have been through it twice." "I should like it later," said Holmes, and turned away, and I thought at the time that he had lost interest. He spent the next half-hour on his knees. He looked at the boards under the racks. He looked at the door and its lock. He stood on a chair at the head of the stair outside and examined the ceiling above the place where the dark lantern had been set down. He asked Culpin the name of the man who wound the regulator and the name of the man who made up the fire in the office, and whether the room had been dusted since Friday. And to all of these Culpin gave short, exact, useful answers, and I began to like him. He had no interest in appearing intelligent. He wanted his shop put straight. "One more," said Holmes at last. "You told me you keep the tools. Do you keep them in racks?" "Every one of them, and every one numbered on the wall behind it. And if a man leaves a tool out of its place, I know it before he's got his coat on." "Show me the machine shop rack." We went down again. It was a plain board on the wall by the lathe, with the shapes of the tools painted on it in white lead, so that an empty shape shouted at you. Nothing was missing. Culpin ran his eye along it once and grunted. Holmes took down the last item on the board. It was a bar of steel about 18 inches long and as thick as my thumb, with a flattened middle, the sort of thing a man puts through the eye of a chuck key to get a purchase on it. "The Tommy bar," said Culpin. Is it always so clean?" Culpin took it and turned it over. Then he stopped turning it. "No," he said slowly. "It's had paraffin on it, and it's been re-oiled. It shouldn't have. It doesn't want it. It's a bit of bar." "How long has it looked like this?" "I couldn't say. I don't handle it once a month." Holmes put it back on its 2 pegs and squared it there with 1 finger until it hung exactly along the painted shape, and said nothing at all. Old Gillam was fetched down to us in the packing shed, and he came holding his cap in both hands, and put it on the bench, and took it up again twice while we were speaking to him. He was 70 and looked more, a long grey stick of a man with a chest that whistled, and he had been frightened for 4 days by professionals, and had reached the stage at which a witness will agree to anything at all. "You walk the building at 10 and at 12, said Holmes. "I do, sir, 10 and 12. "Did you walk it at 10 on the Thursday?" "I did, sir." "That is not true," said Holmes, without any particular emphasis, "and I want you to understand that I do not care in the least. You go out at 9:45, and you come back a little after 11, and you have done so for a great many years, and it is at the Seckford Arms, and the reason I know it is that the potman there described your coat to me before I described it to him." Gillam's mouth opened and shut. Then a sort of collapse went over him, and he sat down on the edge of the packing case. "They'll turn me off," he said. "That's 24 year in this yard, and there's nowhere but the house." "Nobody is going to turn you off." Holmes sat down beside him on the packing case, which is a thing I have seen him do perhaps 5 times in 20 years. "Now, on the Thursday you heard Mr. Threadgold go into the rating room." "I heard the door. That door's got a squeal on it you could hear in the square." The old man wiped his face. "9:30, that'd be. He was regular as the church." "How do you know the hour?" "By my own clock, sir, on the shelf. And my own clock's kept by the shop, because he'd not have a clock wrong on the premises, not so much as mine. He come up them stairs one Michaelmas, and set it hisself, and stood over it 10 minutes. Gillam gave a small, watery laugh. 10 minutes for an old tin thing worth 8p. "And then you went out." "And then I went out." "Did you see anybody in the court?" "There was nobody. There's never nobody in that court of a Thursday. It's all shut by 8. He looked up. "I'd have said if there was. I'd have said it to them, and they'd not have wanted it." "Why not?" "Because they'd got the boy," said Gillam simply. Holmes was silent a moment. "The gate," he said. The old man's hands began to work at the cap again. "I'll say it, and then I'll be turned off after all, and you may as well know it as not. It was me let him in of a night. Young Larkin, 9 or 10 week it's been, and a shilling of a Saturday, and I never asked him what he was at, because I knew what he was at. He was at that curb thing of his, and he'd have told me if I'd asked, and then I'd have had to know it." He looked at Holmes with a kind of defiance. "He's not a thief, sir. He never took so much as a length of wire out of that shop. He'd bring his own metal in his pocket, like a poacher. And on the Thursday you let him in." "I never did. I left the gate off the bolt for him at 9:45 when I went out, same as always, and he come when he come, and I was abed. I never saw him that night, and I never saw the gentleman that night, and if I'd walked round at 12 like I'm paid to, I'd have found him, and I've laid awake with that ever since." Holmes stood up. "If you had walked round at 12, he said, you would have found him 2 hours dead, and you would have been the man who was in the building, and Inspector Hopkins would have had you instead of the boy. Go to bed at your usual hour, Mr. Gillam. It is the only piece of good fortune you have had this year, and I am not going to spoil it for you." We left him sitting on the packing case with his cap in his hands. "You have made him very happy," I said, "and I do not see that we are any further on. I have made him honest, which is more useful, and I am one small step further, though it is a step in the dark." Holmes paused at the foot of the stair. The gate was not left off the bolt for a thief. It was left off the bolt for a boy with a lathe. Whatever came into this building through that gate came in by accident, on the back of somebody else's secret. That is worth remembering, Watson, though I could not tell you yet what it is worth. We went up to the office to see the dead man's books. It was a narrow room with a good fire, and I remember that after the rating room, the warmth of it came at us like a hand. Threadgold's cash book was ruled in a hand so regular that at a distance you would have called it print. Holmes turned the pages slowly from the back. He was careful with small sums. "He was careful with everything," said Culpin from the doorway. "He was the exactest man I ever stood under. There's men in this shop that hated him for it, and I'll not name them, because they'd have hated any man that made them do it twice." "Did you hate him?" Culpin looked at Holmes for a moment. "I got on with him," he said. "You want to know a thing about Mr. Threadgold, sir. He never took a penny that wasn't his, and he never gave a man a chance he hadn't earned, and he'd have cut his own hand off before he'd have told a lie about a rate. There's not many like that. It don't make them comfortable to work for." "No," said Holmes, "it does not." He had stopped at a page. "October 29th. Mr. Ockley, Newcastle, on account, £4 4. Who is Mr. Ockley? Never heard the name. Is there a Newcastle house that the firm deals with? Not in my time." Holmes made a note of it in his shirt cuff, and turned another page, and closed the book. It was as we were going down the stairs that Culpin said the thing. He was 2 steps below us, with his hand on the rail, and he had begun to talk about the Friday morning in the manner of a man who has told it a dozen times and will tell it again to be rid of it. Gillam came up hollerin', and I was in the passage getting the gas on. I went up 3 at a time, and there he was on his face by the racks, poor old gentleman, struck down at his own clocks, with the winder still in his hand, and I thought, well, they'll not believe this in the square. "Yes," said Holmes. I had my notebook out, because I have kept the habit these many years of setting down what men say while they are saying it, and I wrote that sentence with the rest, and thought nothing of it whatever. Mr. Cornelius Bagnall received us in the front office with the manner of a man receiving a summons he has decided in advance to resent. He was 50, very neat, with a waistcoat a shade too good for Clerkenwell, and a way of touching his cuffs when he spoke. He had been junior partner for 11 years, and by the articles of the partnership the whole of the business now came to him, and he told us so himself within 4 minutes, which I thought either very foolish or very clever. You will hear it from somebody, so you may as well hear it straight. I get the lot: stock, goodwill, the Admiralty contract, the name over the door. If you are looking for a man who is better off on Friday than he was on Thursday, here I am, and I have a good coat on. And your quarrel with the deceased was about American watches and about machinery, and it had been going on for 6 years, and I lost it every time. He touched his cuff. Hubert would not have a machine-cut wheel in the place. He would not have a wheel out of the place either, not so much as a spring bought in, and the trade has gone by him at a trot. I told him in this room in September that we should be selling second-hand pianos in 5 years. He told me that a chronometer made by a man who did not care was a lie with a lid on it. That was the level of the discussion. You disliked him. I could not get on with him. That is not the same thing, though it will do for a jury. Bagnall sat down heavily. I will tell you something you may believe or not. In 11 years, that man never once said a thing to me that was untrue. Not once. Do you know how tiring that is in a business? You cannot get round a man like that. You cannot even lie to him comfortably, because he assumes you are honest, and then you have to be. Where were you on Thursday evening? At the Institute, the Horological Institute in Northampton Square, 4 minutes' walk from here. There was a paper read on temperature compensation, and I was in the chair, and I sat where 50 men could see me from 8 o'clock until 11. And afterwards 9 of us went to the Seckford Arms, and I did not get home to Highbury until 12:30. He said all this with a certain sour relish. You will want the attendance book. Ask Hebden, the secretary. He signs them in at the door like a school. I shall, said Holmes. And when you have, you may tell your inspector to stop wasting the parish's money and let that boy go. It was so unexpected that I saw Hopkins's head come round. Larkin, said Holmes. Larkin. Bagnall's mouth had thinned. I have no love for the lad. He is one of Hubert's, all hands and no manners, and thinks 1/100th of an inch is a moral question. But he did not put an old man on the floor. He hasn't it in him, and he hasn't the reason, and I will say so from the box if it comes to that, and Hubert would have said so before me. Then why will he not speak? How the devil should I know? He's 24. Bagnall stood up again, restless. When I was 24, I had 3 secrets, and every one of them was rubbish, and I'd have gone to the gallows before I'd have told my master any of them. We came out into the court, and the fog had got into it, and hung between the buildings like something waiting to be told to move. An unpleasant man, said Hopkins, and an honest one, I'm afraid. He is neither particularly, said Holmes. He is a disappointed one. Get the attendance book for Mr. Hebden tonight, and do not read only for Bagnall's name. For whose, then? For anybody's. Threadgold had lived in Canonbury, in a flat-fronted house with a laurel in a tub, and his sister kept it for him. Miss Harriet Threadgold was 62, and received us in a parlour where every object stood at a right angle to every other object, and she gave us tea because that was the form, and her hands were perfectly steady on the pot, and her eyes were not. You will want to know whether he had enemies, she said. The inspector wanted to know that. I told him that my brother had no enemies, and a great many people who found him tiresome, and he wrote it down, and I do not think he saw the difference. "I see it," said Holmes. "Then you are ahead of the inspector." She set the pot down. "Hubert was tiresome, Mr. Holmes. He was tiresome to me for 40 years. He would not let a thing alone. If the butcher sent us short weight, he did not change the butcher. He weighed the joint every week for a 12-month, and then went and showed the man his figures, and the man cried, and Hubert could not understand why I was angry about it. Had he been himself this autumn?" For the first time she hesitated. "No," she said. Since about Michaelmas he had not slept. He was up at 3 and 4 in the morning, and I would hear him in the room below, walking. In October he went to Mr. Vellacott, who is our solicitor, and came back and said it had been of no use, and when I asked him what had been of no use, he said it was a matter of conscience and not of business, and that Vellacott was a lawyer and could only tell him what he might do, and he already knew what he must do. Did he say more? Once. She looked at the fire. On the Sunday before he died, he came in from church, and he sat down where you are sitting, and he said, "Harriet, if a man does the right thing, and a great deal of harm comes of it, is he answerable for the harm?" And I said, "I am sure I don't know. Ask the vicar." And he said, "I have." He said the vicar had told him that we are answerable for our own acts, and not for the world's, and that he could not get it to come out right, however he took it. And then he asked whether there was any of the seed cake. Was there a packet from the north in October, registered perhaps? On the 27th. It came at 8 in the morning, and he signed for it in the hall, and took it into the back room, and did not go to the works until 11, which he had not done in 9 years. Miss Threadgold's chin came up a little. I did not ask him. He would have told me if it had been mine to know. That was how we lived, and it worked very well. And I have thought about that packet every night since the 12th of November. Holmes put down his cup and stood. "Miss Threadgold, when this is finished I shall come back and tell you what was in it, if you wish to be told. I would advise you to wish not to be." "I am 62, she said, "and I have nobody else to think about now. I shall wish to be told." We walked down to the Essex Road in silence. "He went to a solicitor," I said at last, "and to a clergyman, and got no comfort from either, and did the thing anyhow." "He did the thing anyhow. It is the least fashionable form of courage there is, Watson, and it is very nearly always fatal to somebody." Holmes signalled a cab. "A registered packet from the north on the 27th of October, and 4 guineas paid to a Mr. Ockley of Newcastle on the 29th, on account. 2 days is exactly the interval in which an honest man reads a report he has been dreading, and then sits down and pays for it because the bill is owed." They had Larkin in Holloway. Hopkins got us in on the Monday. He was a long, loose-jointed young man, with a fair moustache that had not decided what it wanted to be, and the raw red hands of a finisher, and he stood up when we came in, because he had been brought up to. His eyes went to Holmes's face and stayed there, and I have seen that look before, on men in the Berkshire wards who have been told a thing and cannot make it be true. "Sit down, Mr. Larkin," said Holmes. "I am not the police. I am nothing at all in law. Anything you say to me I may repeat, and I tell you so at the start." "They said you'd come." Larkin sat. "The warder said, He thought I'd be glad. And are you? No, sir. He said it without insolence, because you'll ask me the same as they ask me, and I'll say the same, and then everybody will be sure. Then let us not ask it. Let me tell you instead. Holmes drew up the stool and sat down on it, so that his face was on a level with the young man's. You have been coming into that building at night for something over 2 months. You came in through the yard gate, which was left unbolted for you. You worked at the big lathe in the machine shop by a tallow candle, because the gas would have shone at the front, and you were cutting a metal that Threadgold and Winch have never bought in their lives, a white alloy with a good deal of nickel in it, which you brought in your own pocket in rod form, and took away again in your own pocket, all but a few turnings that went down between the boards where you could not sweep them. Larkin's face did not move at all, which told me a great deal. On Thursday night you came at about 11:15, and went away at about 1:15, and you never once went above the ground floor. You can't know that. I know the last part, because you came to work on Friday morning and were sick in the yard, and a man who has seen a body at 1 in the morning does not need until 9 to be sick. Holmes leaned forward. Now, I am not going to ask you where you were. I am going to ask you what you are making. The silence went on so long that I heard the warder shift his feet outside. I can't tell you that either, said Larkin. You have applied for a patent. I saw the boy's hands close. You have taken out provisional protection, Holmes went on, quite gently, in your own name, and you have some months in which to complete the specification, and you have not the money to have the work done for you, and so you have done it yourself, on your master's lathe, in your master's time. And if you say so in open court, then every man in the trade will hear that Adam Larkin's invention was made with stolen hours and stolen light, and the firm will lay claim to it, and they will very likely get it. And your master accused you, in front of 11 men, of robbing him, and he was right, and that is exactly what he meant, and it had nothing to do with money at all. Larkin put his head down on his hands. He'd found the lathe warm, he said from behind them, twice, and the gas meter never told on me, but the treadle belt did, because I put it up 2 holes for my height, and I forgot to put it back. He never said what he'd found. He just said he'd have the whole of it out of me before he was done. And I thought, he'll take it. He'll take the whole thing and put the firm's name on it, and he'll be within his rights, and he'll do it on a Wednesday, and go to church on the Sunday, and never lose an hour's sleep. Was he such a man? He was worse than that, sir. He was fair. Larkin looked up, and his face was wet, and he was too far gone to care. You could go to Mr. Bagnolt and cry, and he'd give you a shilling. You couldn't cry to Mr. Threadgold. He'd have wrote down what was right in a little book, and then he'd have done it. And old Gillam let you in. For a shilling a week, the young man's voice cracked on it. 70-year-old. If I say it, he's turned off, and there's nowhere for him but Islington Workhouse, and I'd have his bed to think about for the rest of my life, and I'd be saying with my own mouth, yes, I was in the building, and yes, he'd caught me at it, and yes, he was going to have it off me on the Monday. That's not a defense, sir. That's the charge, said better. Holmes sat back. "No," he said, "it is not a defense. It is worse than the charge, and you have reasoned it out correctly, which is why you are here. We came out through 3 doors into the fog." Hopkins was very quiet. "It hangs together," he said at last, unhappily. "Sir, do you see that it hangs together better now?" He had the motive he could not name. He was in the building. He had the belt up 2 holes, and the old man knew it. "I see that perfectly." "Then what have we gained?" "An hour," said Holmes. "He left at 1:15. If I can put the death outside his hours, I have him. If I cannot, then all I have done is hand the Treasury a motive they had to guess at." He stopped on the pavement and looked back at the wall. "And I cannot put the death anywhere at all at present, because your Dr. Amory has given me 4 hours to play in, and a man may do a great deal in 4 hours. "Amory says 10 till 2. "Amory says 10 till 2 because Amory is an honest man who knows what medicine can do. Watson will tell you the same." I did tell him the same, walking down towards the Angel. A body found at 20 to 7 in an unheated room, with no fire in it since the building was put up, is not a clock. Rigor, temperature, the state of the eye, they will give you a bracket of some hours, and any surgeon who gives you closer than that in a cold room is guessing and calling it science. Hopkins listened and did not like it. "Then the burglar," he said. "Then the burglar," said Holmes. "Yes, I am afraid I must go and find him." I have set down elsewhere how completely Holmes could disappear when he chose, and I shall not describe again the process by which a tall, spare gentleman in a frock-coat became a bent old silver chaser with a bad chest and a bag of scrap. It took him 20 minutes, and it took him off my hands for 2 days. What I can set down is the shape of those 2 days, because I saw the ends of them. Clerkenwell is a village. It is a village of a particular kind, where a man may buy a gold case at 11 in the morning from a house with the Queen's arms over the door, and sell a stolen one at 11 at night in a public bar 4 streets off, and the 2 transactions are conducted by cousins. Holmes went into that village and stirred it. He put out word that a pair of gold hunter cases had come off the Clerkenwell road on the 12th, and that a certain party in Amsterdam would pay for them, and then he sat in 3 separate bars and let the word come back. It came back on the 2nd night, at 10:30, when he sent Wiggins to Baker Street with a scrap of paper that said only, "Bring your stick. Saffron Hill, Picot's Rents, the 2nd door." I have never been fond of Saffron Hill. That night it was worse than usual, because the fog had got down among the courts and made every gas lamp into a dirty yellow ball with nothing round it. Holmes was in the entry with 2 of the irregulars, and Hopkins came up at a run 3 minutes later with a constable. "Top back," said Holmes. "He has a window on the leads, so we must be quick and we must be loud." We were both. What followed took perhaps 40 seconds and involved a table, a great deal of shouting, and a man going through a sash head first onto a flat roof, where the constable, who had gone round, sat on him. When they brought him back into the room by the light of the lantern, I saw a small, wiry, badly frightened person of about 35, with a boiled-looking face, wearing 2 waistcoats. "Nathaniel Pomfret," said Hopkins with enormous satisfaction. "Well, well, Nat, you have had 4 years of my life." "I never," said Pomfret. "You have not been told what yet." "I never, whatever it is." He was shaking. He looked round the room at us, and his eye went from face to face and stopped on Holmes's, and something in it changed. Here. "What's this about, then? What's this really about?" "St. John's Square," said Holmes. "Thursday week." And the little man sat down on the floor and began to cry. I have seen a great many people confronted with their crimes, and I tell you that this was not the crying of a man who has been found out in a murder. It was the crying of a man who has been carrying something up a hill for 5 days. "I knew it," he said. "I knew it, I knew it. I said to her, 'They'll have me for that, they'll have me for that,' and I never touched him." "Tell it," said Holmes. He told it, sitting on the floor with his back against the bed, and Hopkins wrote it down, and it took 19 minutes, and he did not once change a detail. He had gone to St. John's Square at about 1:30 in the morning, on information from a man who knew a boy who packed for the firm, that there were gold cases in a cupboard on the first floor. He found the yard gate unbolted, which he took for the luck of a lifetime. He forced the scullery window with a chisel, got in, and lit his dark lantern in the passage. There was nobody about, and no light anywhere. He went up to the first floor, and could not find the cupboard, because the boy's description had been of the wrong room, and he went up to the second to look for an office. At the head of the second-floor stair, he put the lantern down on the boards to get his hands free. And I went in at the door there, and I hadn't gone 3 steps, and I went over him. Over him. On my hands and knees, sir, across the back of him. Pomfret's voice had gone up, and it was all clocks in there, hundreds of clocks going at once in the pitch dark, and I've got my hands on a dead man's coat. I never had the lantern in with me. I never saw his face, and I don't want to. I went out of that door and down them stairs, and I don't remember the stairs. You took his pocketbook. I had it off him when I went over him. It's a thing you do. He said it wretchedly, as a man admits to a habit. I was in the yard before I knew I'd got it. I took the notes out, and I put it down, and I went over the gate, and I run all the way to the Clerkenwell road, and there was a coffee stall at the top of Farringdon, and I stood at it till I could stand still. The man there'll know me. I had 2 cups, and I couldn't hold the first one. How long were you in the building? 4 minutes, said Pomfret. 5. It was the worst 5 minutes of my life, and I've had 8 years in Portland. Hopkins looked up from his notebook, and his young face in the lantern light was the face of a man watching a bridge go down. You never touched the gold, he said. I never got to the gold. I never wanted the gold after that. I'd have left the crown jewels. The coffee stall keeper at the top of Farringdon Road was named Percy, and he remembered the night perfectly, because it was the night the copper's horse went down on the greasy setts outside his stall, and it took 4 men to get it up. That was at 20 minutes to 2, and Pomfret had come to him a little before it, and had stood at the stall until after it. Nothing had been pledged, sold, or offered anywhere in Clerkenwell or Hatton Garden. There was no gold, because Pomfret had never had any gold. He had £19 in notes, of which he had spent 11, and he gave up the rest out of the second waistcoat. We sat in Baker Street on the Wednesday morning, the 3 of us, and nobody said anything for some time. "He may be lying," said Hopkins, without conviction. "He may. He is not." Holmes was in his chair, with his knees drawn up. "I have made a mistake, Hopkins, and I dislike the taste of it. I took your burglary and made it the center of the affair because it was the only piece of the picture that behaved like a crime. It is not the center. It is a man who came into a dark house 4 minutes after the worst luck of his life, and went out again with £19 and a horror he will keep." "Then we are where we were on Friday, and worse," said Hopkins. "Larkin was in the building, Pomfret was in the building, and the death lies inside Dr. Amory's 4 hours, and both of them are inside it too, and the boy will go before the judge with a motive he now cannot deny, thanks to us. Yes. Mr. Holmes, I came here to be admired." "You came here," said Holmes, "to have your case taken to pieces, whatever you told yourself on the stairs. I have taken it to pieces. I have not yet put anything in its place." He got up and stood at the window a long while. "It is a great pity that the only witnesses who were in that room have nothing to say." He did not speak again for the best part of an hour, and I went out to my rounds and left him there. When I came back at 6, he was gone, and Mrs. Hudson said he had gone out at 2 with a bag, and had asked her, of all things, for the loan of a kitchen chair. He came in at 9, and he had the rate book of Threadgold and Winch under his arm, and a look on his face that I had not seen for 3 weeks. "Watson, what time do you go to bed?" "That depends entirely on you." "Then you do not go at all. We are going back to Clerkenwell, and you are bringing your watch, and I want the one with the seconds hand you use for pulses." The works were dark, and Hopkins had the key. We went up through a building that was quite silent except for the rating room, which we could hear from the landing, that dry pattering going on and on for nobody. Holmes lit the gas and stood in the middle of the room. "I want you both to look at this room and tell me what is wrong with it as a place for a murder." Hopkins considered it. "There is nothing to take. There is £300 worth of gold 1 floor below, and none of it was touched, which we now know is because our only thief never got to it. Try again." "There is nowhere to hide," I said. "Better. What else?" "It is cold," said Hopkins, "and there is no reason to come into it unless you work here." "That is the answer, and I have been 3 days getting to it." Holmes went to the racks and put his hand flat on the front of the 3rd tier. "Now attend. Every one of these instruments is a 2-day movement. Wound once, in the 24 hours, it will run some 56 hours before it stops, and it is wound every night at 9:30 by one man, who is dead. Nobody wound them on the Friday, because on the Friday the police were in this room, and the works were shut, and no other hand in the building was permitted to touch them. Therefore, any instrument that Mr. Threadgold did not wind on Thursday night ran itself out and stopped on the Saturday morning. Hopkins's hand stopped halfway to his pocket. 9 of them stopped, he said. 9 of them stopped. Numbers 12 to 20. It is written in the rate book, in the rating clerk's hand under the date, and it was written there as a trade misfortune, and nobody read it as anything else, because it is a page of figures about clocks, and it was set down 2 days after the crime. Holmes turned round. Mr. Threadgold wound 31 of these, and did not wind 9. He was struck down in the middle of his round. "Then the 9 are the last 9 on the round," said Hopkins slowly. "That is what must be proved and not assumed. If the round goes in the order of the numbers on the cards, then he wound 1 to 11 and 21 to 40, which is nonsense because it would mean he skipped 9 boxes and came back. So the round does not go by number, it goes by the room." He picked up the kitchen chair he had brought and set it under the gas. "The numbers on those cards are the owner's numbers, not ours. Look at 12 to 20. They are all one hand and one date. 9 instruments entered together on the 29th of October from one house." I looked. 9 cards in a row, and at the head of each the same line of copperplate, Ormsby, Tench and Company for the Southern Line, per SS. 9 sisters come in together and racked together in the last bay, because it was the empty bay. Holmes stepped up on the chair, then down again, then across to the regulator. And so the question is only this: is the last bay the last place he came to? Watson, your watch. What followed was the strangest hour I have spent in his company, and I set it down plainly because there was nothing in it but patience. He began at the regulator clock, because a man who winds a rating room begins by looking at the standard. He opened the case of number 1 on the bottom tier by the door, took out the winding key, gave it the 7½ turns that these instruments take, closed the lid, wrote nothing, and moved to number 2, which was not number 2, but the next box along. "Time me." I timed him. He did the first bay of 8 in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. He did it again in 2 minutes and 18. He made me do it, and I took 2 minutes and 50. And he said, "You are a doctor, and you have never wound a chronometer in your life." He had done it 11,000 times. Take the 18 seconds. Hopkins had got out the plan of the room and was drawing on it. Bottom tier, door to window. Middle tier, window back to door. Top tier, door to window again, he said. It is the way a man walks. You would not cross the room twice for the pleasure of it. And the last bay of the top tier is at the window end, said Holmes, and it holds numbers 12 to 20, 9 boxes, 31 wound, 9 standing open and dead. He came down off the chair. He began at 9:30, as he had begun every night for 9 years, and Gillam heard him begin, because Gillam heard the rating room door and looked at the clock in his own room, and then went out to the Seckford Arms, which he does at that hour, and has always done, and has now told me so twice. 31 instruments at 18 seconds is 9 minutes and 18 seconds. Say 9 minutes and a half, for he was 58, and there is a step at the middle bay. Hubert Threadgold was struck down between 21 and 22 minutes before 10 o'clock at night. Nobody spoke. Under it all, the 31 went on pattering. Amory gave us 4 hours, I said. This gives us 4 minutes. Medicine cannot do better in a cold room, and does not pretend to. The clocks are not being clever. They are only doing the one thing they are for. Holmes went down on his knees by the 3rd bay and reached far under the bottom rack with his stick and drew out something that rang faintly on the boards. He held it up. It was a small brass winding key with a square socket. "That was in his hand," he said. "It is on no inventory of yours, Hopkins. It was 8 feet from him, under 2 inches of rack, which is where a thing goes when it leaves the hand of a man who is falling." Hopkins had gone rather white. He was doing the sums that I was doing. 20 to 10, he said. Larkin came at 11:15. Pomfret came at 1:30. Neither of them was within a mile of this room at 20 minutes to 10. Larkin was seen by your own constable at the corner of Seckford Street at 11:15, walking towards the works and not away from them, and his landlady heard him go out at 11. Pomfret you have measured against a coffee stall and a fallen horse. Then who? Ah! Holmes stood up and put the key in his pocket. That is the second half of the same question, and I have had it in front of me since Monday, and could not see it for the noise. Consider what we have taken away. We have taken away the burglary, which is a real burglary, belonging to nobody. We have taken away the young man at the lathe, whose whole crime is a nickel alloy and a shilling a week. Strip those 2 men out of Thursday night, Hopkins, and look at what is left in this room at 20 minutes to 10. Nothing, said Hopkins. Nothing whatever. No forced window, for the window was forced 3 hours and a half later. No candle, for the candle was burning downstairs at midnight in another man's hand. No lantern, for the lantern was set down on that landing by a thief at 1:30. There is not one trace in this building of the man who killed Hubert Threadgold. Holmes turned the gas down, and the room went to shadow. And that is the only piece of evidence I have, and it is enough to be going on with. He brought no light, because he knew the building in the dark. He forced no door, because he had a key. He carried no weapon in with him, because there was a tool rack on his way up, and after he had done it, he wiped the bar in paraffin and oiled it, and hung it back on its 2 pegs, square with the white paint, and went down and turned the gas off at the main in the passage, and locked the street door behind him, and went home. Hopkins said, in a voice not much above a whisper, "A man of the shop." A man of the shop, who had been in that building 11 or 12 hours that day already, so that not a footprint, not a hair, not a smear of oil that he left behind him could ever be told from the ones he left at 4 in the afternoon in front of witnesses. He is invisible because he is everywhere. There are 11 of them, and one of them did it, and I have not the smallest notion which. I could not sleep, and at 2 in the morning I did what I always do when I cannot sleep, which is to go over my notes. I have kept them all my life, in the same shorthand, and their virtue is not that they are good, but that they are stupid. They write down what was said, whether it mattered or not. I went through the Clerkenwell pages from the beginning. Hopkins in our sitting room, the court, the machine shop, the rating room, the office and the cash book, and then the stairs. He was in the passage getting the gas on. I went up 3 at a time, and there he was, on his face by the racks, poor old gentleman, struck down at his own clocks, with the winder still in his hand. I read it twice, and put the book down, and picked it up again. Then I went and stood outside Holmes's door for a moment, like a fool, and then I knocked. He was awake. He was sitting on the floor in his dressing gown, with the plan of the work spread out and the ashtray full. "I have something," I said, "and it may be nothing at all." He read it where I held it out to him, and he did not move for a long time. "When did I find that key, Watson?" "This evening. Wednesday." "And who, before this evening, knew that Hubert Threadgold had a winding key in his hand when he went down?" "No one," I said. "Not Hopkins, not Amory. It is on no list. It was under the rack." "It is on one list." Holmes got up off the floor, and he had a strange, still expression that I did not care for at all. "It is on yours, in your own hand, taken down on Monday morning on the stairs of that building, from the man who says he was in the passage getting the gas on." He put the notebook into my hands. "Keep that safe, and do not tell Hopkins tonight, because he is young, and he will go straight there and ask him." "Holmes, a man may say a thing loosely. He may have meant only that the old man was at his winding." "He may, and if that is all it is, we shall find it out in a day, and I shall have made an ugly guess about a decent man." He was already reaching for his coat, though it was 2:30. But I asked him nothing about winding. I asked him nothing about the body at all. He offered it in a sentence he has told a dozen times, because it is what he saw. It is the thing he cannot get out from behind his eyes. There were 4 days to the committal, and it took him 2 of them. The first went on Mr. Hebden and the attendance book of the Horological Institute, which is kept at the door like a school register, as Bagnall had said. Bagnall's name was there for the 12th of November, signed at 8:08. 51 others were there with him. Holmes went down the column twice with his finger. "He is not on it," he said. "Who is not?" "Culpin, Oswald Culpin, elected member, subscription paid to Michaelmas, and present at every meeting since March, according to Mr. Hebden, who thinks well of him and says he is the only foreman in the district who reads a paper without moving his lips." Holmes closed the book, and on the 12th of November he told his wife he was going, and he did not go. "How do you know he told his wife?" "Because I asked her this morning on the doorstep in the character of a man collecting for the Institute's benevolent fund. He did not look pleased with himself. She is a small, tired, cheerful woman of about 40, and she was at the wash-tub, and she said, 'Thursday?' 'He was at his Institute, sir. He never misses.' And then she asked me whether the Benevolent Fund did anything for children's boots, and I said I would inquire. He was quiet for some way down the street. 'That is the part they never write about,' he said. 'Come, Newcastle.' The second day went on, Mr. Ockley. There is an Ockley in Newcastle upon Tyne, in Granger Street, and he describes himself upon his brass plate as an inquiry agent, and upon his cards as a confidential agent to the profession, and he was disposed at first to say nothing whatever. Holmes's telegram had gone up at 9. The answer came at 4, and it said what Holmes had been fairly certain it would say, since he read a line in a dead man's cash book on the Monday. Instructed, 19th September, by H. Threadgold, Esquire, St. John's Square, London, to search marriages, Bishop Wearmouth, 1874 to 1880, for one Oswald Culpin. Marriage found, 3rd May, 1877. Oswald Culpin, bachelor watch finisher, to Jane Aird, spinster, Wife living, Monk Wearmouth, deserted, 1881, no issue. Report and certified copy, forwarded, 26th October. Account settled, 29th October. Asterisk. I read it over Holmes's shoulder in the hall of Baker Street, with the gas hissing and the front door still open behind us, and I felt a cold that had nothing to do with November. "And the woman at the wash-tub," I said, "is Mercy Culpin, married at St. Mary's, Islington, in 1884, in perfect good faith, with 6 children, of whom the eldest is apprenticed and the youngest is 2. Holmes folded the telegram very small. "She is not his wife. She never has been. She has no more standing in law than a lodger, and the 6 of them are what the statutes of this country are pleased to call illegitimate, and he has been liable these 19 years to 7 years' penal servitude, and Hubert Threadgold found it out for 4 guineas. "Why?" I said. "Why did he look?" "Because something did not balance." Holmes went slowly up the stairs ahead of me. "He was not a spiteful man, Watson, and I will not have him made one. I think he found something, a letter, a name in a book, a slip of the tongue about the North, and being what he was, he could not leave it half known. He had a horror of a thing being half known. He paid 4 guineas, and he learned the whole of it, and then he had to decide what to do, and there was only one thing that such a man could do, and God help him, he did it slowly and kindly." He stopped at the top and looked down at me. "There is a pocket diary in the drawer of his desk in that office, and Hopkins read it and got nothing from it because it is all initials. There is an entry for the 7th of November. It says, 'C. Told him again. He must choose. Monday.' And the entry for the 9th says, 'C. Asks for time. There is no time to give him. It is not mine to give.'" We went to Islington on the Friday evening, 4 days before the committal, and we went without a warrant and without a plan, and I have never liked a piece of work less. The house was one of a terrace in a street off the Liverpool road, 4 rooms and a scullery, with a scraper by the door, and the step whitened. A boy of about 9 opened it. He had a slate in his hand, and he looked at the 3 of us on the pavement, and then over his shoulder, and shouted, "Father, it's men!" Culpin came out of the kitchen in his shirt-sleeves, with a knife in his hand and a cloth over his arm, because he had been cutting bread, and he saw Hopkins first, and then Holmes, and his face did the thing that faces do when a man has been expecting a knock for 8 days. "You'd better come in the front," he said. The front room was cold, and had not been used since Sunday. There was a horsehair sofa, and a picture of a ship, and on the mantel a small carriage clock in a case, the sort of thing a firm gives a man for 20 years. Culpin put the knife down on the sill, as though he had only then noticed it, and stood with his back to the empty grate. From the other side of the door came the noise of children being told to be quiet, which is louder than children. "Mr. Culpin," said Holmes, "I am going to tell you what happened in the rating room on Thursday the 12th of November. I shall try to be exact, because you are a man who cares about that, and because he was. Stop me where I am wrong." Culpin said nothing. At 9:30 that night, Mr. Threadgold began his round. He wound 31 instruments. He did not wind the last 9, and they ran themselves out and stopped on the Saturday morning, and the rating clerk entered it in the book as a broken trial. 31 instruments at 18 seconds apiece puts the blow at 19 or 20 minutes to 10 at night, and there is no other way of reading it. "That's clever," said Culpin. "It is arithmetic. At that hour the street door was locked, and the front windows were fast, and the man who came in did not force anything, because nothing was forced until 1:30 in the morning, by a thief from Saffron Hill, who has told us the whole of his night, and can prove the half of it at a coffee stall. He came in with a key. He brought no candle and no lantern into a building without a light in it, which means he could go up those stairs in the dark without touching the wall. On his way through the machine shop, he took the tommy bar off the rack by the lathe." Culpin's eyes had not moved from the carpet. Afterwards, he cleaned it in paraffin and oiled it and hung it back on its 2 pegs, square with the paint. A man who is just killed does not do that because he is cunning. He does it because his hands have done it 4,000 times, and they went on working while the rest of him could not. Then he turned the gas off at the main in the passage, which is the last act of the man who locks that building, and he locked the street door and walked home. "You've no more than a bar hung up straight," said Culpin. His voice had not changed at all, and that was somehow the worst of it. 11 men in that shop could hang a bar up straight. Yes, so I ask a smaller question. Who in that building knew, on the Friday morning, that Mr. Threadgold had his winding key in his hand when he fell? For the first time the man's head came up. "Nobody knew it," said Holmes. "The key was not in his hand when he was found. It had gone 8 feet across the boards and under the bottom rack, and it lay there for 6 days, and no policeman and no surgeon and no clerk in that firm ever saw it, and I took it out with a walking stick on Wednesday night. On Monday morning, on the stairs, you told Dr. Watson that the old gentleman was struck down at his own clocks, with the winder still in his hand. He wrote it in his book. He wrote it because he writes everything down, and neither he nor I saw what it was for 2 days. The room was very quiet. Out in the passage a small voice said something and was hushed. You were not describing what you found on Friday morning, Mr. Culpin. You were describing what you saw on Thursday night, and you have been seeing it ever since, and one day it came out of you on a staircase in front of a man with a pencil. Culpin looked at the picture of the ship for a while. 19 years I've been going to sleep, he said, and getting up and going to work, and I never once did a thing I couldn't tell her. Not once, barring the one thing, and that was done before I ever saw her. He rubbed his palms slowly on his trousers. It's a queer feeling being caught. It's not like they say. It's more like putting a thing down. Tell it, said Holmes. He never wanted anything. Culpin said it as a man states the central fact of his life. That's what none of you'll understand, and I've give up trying. If he'd wanted money, I'd have got money. If he'd wanted me to go, I'd have gone. I'd have gone to Coventry. I'd have gone to Canada. He didn't want a thing off me. He wanted it right. He looked up. He come to me in the packing shed on the 6th of November with a paper in his hand, and he was as white as I was, and he says, Culpin, I know what you have done. And he says, I have known a fortnight, and I have prayed about it. And he says, you must tell her. You must tell that woman what she is, and you must tell the parish, and then you must stand up to what the law does to you, and I will keep your place open till you come out, and I will see the children are fed." "He offered you that?" I said, before I could stop myself. "He meant it, Doctor." Culpin's mouth twisted. "He'd have done it, too. He'd have fed them for 7 years and sent me a card at Christmas, and never once said a word to a soul. There wasn't a mean bone in him, and that's what killed him. If he'd been a bad man, I could have bought him, or frightened him, or told him to go to the devil. You can't do nothing with a good man. He's like a wall built right. There's no way round it, and there's no way over it, and it don't care how long you stand there." "And you asked for time?" "I asked for time on the Monday, and he give me till the Monday after, and he says, 'That's the last of the time, because it isn't mine to give.' And I went home that night, and I sat at that table, and she'd got the little one on her lap, and she was doing his boot, and she says, 'You're quiet, Oz.' And I says, 'I'm tired.' He stopped. 9-year-old, that one at the door. And there's Emily. She's 15. She's out at the shirt place, and she's walking out with a young fellow from the chapel, and his people are respectable. What do you think happens to Emily?" Nobody answered him. Thursday, I told her I'd go to my institute, and I went out and I walked. I walked up to the Angel, and down again, and up Roseberry Avenue, and round twice, and I don't remember any of it. And at 9:30, I was in St. John's Square with my key in my hand. He drew a long breath. I went in to beg him. That's the truth, and it's no good to me, but it's the truth. I was going to go down on the floor of that room if I had to, which I've never done to any man. And I come through the shop, and I picked up the bar off the rack going through. "Why?" said Hopkins. "I've told myself 100 times I picked it up without thinking." Culpin's hands hung at his sides. "I'd like that to be so. I don't say it is." "And upstairs?" "He was at the top tier with his back to me, going along, and he didn't turn round. He knew it was me by the step. He says, 'Culpin, I'm at my winding.' And then he says, 'And it makes no difference.' He said it kind. That's what I can't get shut of. He said it the way you'd tell a man there's no more soup." He put the flat of his hand over his eyes for a moment and took it away. "I don't recollect the rest, and I'm not going to make it up for you. There's 20 years of my life I can't find between him saying that and me standing on the stair with the bar in my hand and the paraffin can open, and I was doing the bar up like it was the end of a shift. And then I turned the gas off at the main, because that's what I do, and I locked the door, because that's what I do, and I went home, and she'd left me a light." He turned round and looked at the little carriage clock on the mantel, and he did not touch it. 20 years that's for," he said. "He give it me himself in the shop. He made a speech, and he was bad at it, and everybody laughed at him, and he didn't mind. Hopkins came forward then and said the words he had to say, and it was done very quietly. At the door Culpin stopped, and for the first time that evening something came apart in him. "That boy," he said, "Larkin, he's a good workman. He's the best pair of hands in that shop, and he don't know it yet. You'll get him out?" "He will be out on Monday," said Holmes. "He come to me in September and asked me about a compensation curb," said Copin, "and I told him he was a fool, and I thought about it for a week after." He put his hat on. "I never said a word against him to the police. 8 days. You can ask them. Whatever else." "I know," said Holmes. "You made it very difficult for me." Larkin was discharged on the Monday morning. It took 4 minutes, and the magistrate did not look up. The rest of it Holmes arranged in the way he arranged such things, without appearing to arrange anything at all. He went to see Cornelius Bagnall in the front office at St. John's Square, with the whole of the story in his hand, including the parts about the yard gate and the shilling a week and the belt let up 2 holes, and he pointed out, in a manner of complete indifference, that a firm which has had a partner murdered by its own foreman may find the newspapers taking an interest in every other irregularity on the premises, and that the surest way to keep the name of Threadgold and Winch out of the second column was for there to be nothing further to print. Bagnall, who was not a fool, understood him within a minute, and disliked him for the rest of his life. The upshot was a paper signed in that office on the Wednesday, by which the firm renounced any claim whatever in the invention of Adam Larkin, journeyman, and undertook to pay the cost of completing his specification, in consideration of his agreement to remain in their employ for 3 years at the rate of a leading hand. Wilfred Gillam kept his 2 rooms over the packing shed, and was not asked how the yard gate came to be unbolted. He is dead now. He died in his bed there, which I take to be the whole of what Larkin had been buying at a shilling a week. The invention was a form of compensation curb for the balance spring, intended for service in the tropics, and it was not a great one. It was taken up in a small way by 2 houses, and it earned its maker something under £200 in 11 years, and Larkin has a shop of his own now in Northampton Square, with 3 men in it, and I have his card somewhere. Oswald Culpin was tried at the Old Bailey in the January, and the jury were out for 50 minutes, which surprised nobody who was in the court. There was a memorial got up afterwards, and a great many names on it, and it came to nothing, and I do not think he expected it to. He wrote once to Baker Street, a short letter in a very good clerk's hand, asking whether it was true that the 9 clocks had stopped, and if so, which numbers they were. Holmes wrote back and told him. He did not say what else he put in the envelope, and I did not ask, but I know that a money order went from this house to a street off the Liverpool Road every quarter day for a number of years, and that it went in a name that was not his. We walked back through the square on the evening of the day Larkin signed, and the fog had gone at last, and there was a hard, clean cold in its place, with stars over the chimneys. "You are out of temper," I said. "I am out of a case, which is worse." Holmes had his chin down in his collar, and I am irritated with myself. 3 days, Watson, and every one of them spent on a burglary that had nothing to do with anything, because a broken window shouts and a wound-down clock does not. You could hardly have known. I could have counted. That is all it wanted from first to last, somebody to count. We came out of the court into St. John's Square and stood a moment. There was one light burning high up on the second floor of the works, where the new trial had been started on the Monday, and a man was in there with 40 instruments doing the round, and he would be doing it at 9:30 tomorrow, and the day after, and every night for the rest of his working life. He was not liked, I said. He was not likable. He was something rarer and a good deal more uncomfortable. Holmes looked up at the lit window. I have known 100 men who would have taken money to hold their tongues, and I dare say I could have found you 50 who would have told the story about the town for the pleasure of telling it. I have known very few who would sit down and work out what was right, and then do it, at their own cost, kindly, and without once asking themselves whether they could bear the consequences to other people. He was the best man in that building, and he was killed for it, and I do not propose to draw any moral from that whatever. He turned up his coat collar. "It is nearly 10, he said. "Somebody in there is at number 12.